1. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got 3 killer words for you, and they're so easy, but when you put them all together, they like ask this really challenging question. So I'm going to ask you this, and then we'll unpack it with today's guest. And have you ever caught yourself thinking to yourself, these are the 3 words? Is this it? If so, you're in the right place. Stay tuned because we have a special guest and we're going to delve into this tough question today. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Betsy Pepine. How are you today?
I'm great, Dave. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for jumping on. You are involved, you're a motivational speaker, you're doing some coaching, but you also are in the real estate world. So you have the Pepine Realty and Pepine Property Management. Are those how are those been going with all this turmoil in the real estate world?
There, the real estate market is very resilient, so, and especially in Florida. So we are doing fine. I look at things changes, uh, industry changes as opportunities, and we always have opportunities. So it's wonderful.
Always something to do, right? That's
Hmm.
awesome. Well, we're going to talk today about this piece that you are notorious for about is this it? And I kind of want to before we jump into that, Betsy, I kind of want to go back into your world because you weren't always an entrepreneur. You were in corporate America for a while,
Yep.
and we have tons of people around the world listening right now that always are like asking the question of how do I start my own business? When do I do it? What does it look like? And we always tell people up front, hey, just because it worked for us doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So please, don't try this at home, so to speak, unless you're ready. But fill us in if you can, Betsy, on what did that look like for you? You were in the pharmaceutical world. Was
Mhm.
that so? Did you have that question? Is this it? Is that kind of where that started?
Um, yes, it started there. I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 10 years and was a part of a corporate layoff after 10 years at one of these companies. I was working on a drug that did not get FDA approval, and it
Okay.
didn't look like it was going to get FDA approval ever. And so they laid off the entire commercial division of which I was a part of.
Wow.
And yeah, and I was 31, and I had I definitely had entrepreneurial sparks throughout my life. That's kind of where my passion was. But I was raised in a family where that was not considered maybe a real job. It was, I grew up in a
Yeah.
very healthcare oriented family where everybody
Oh, sure.
is a physician. And
Okay.
so, and that's why I was in the healthcare industry. So I resisted that for a long time. But then when I was laid off, and in a very short period of time, I was laid off and I went through a divorce, and it was all very sudden and rather unexpected. So I think for all of us, when we're faced with some life events that cause us to pivot, it does make you reevaluate everything that you're doing. And so that was like, is this it? Here I am
Yeah.
thinking I checked off all the boxes to, have a great career, great family, and I'm finding myself unemployed with a single mom with a 1 and 2 year old at home.
Wow.
And so that's when I actually moved back home to my home in Florida and where I was raised. And then it did take me a couple years to figure out what my next steps were going to be. So what I ended up doing in the interim was just did consulting work. And that was great for me because it got me out of the security of a paycheck and benefits and the kind of the predictability of working for somebody else, and it got me working on my own, still in the pharmaceutical industry, but I didn't enjoy it. But at least I
Sure.
enjoyed the freedom of being able to work from home. And this was in the early 2000s when remote work was really not common, but it
Sure.
allowed me to stay at home with my children.
Sure.
And then that's when I said, okay, what's the long-term plan? What would I really truly want to do? And that I felt like I wanted to try real estate because it was something that I had had long had a passion for, and developed a plan where financially I knew that I could support us for, frugally, very frugally for 2 years
Yeah,
in the field if I made a go out of it, and if I gave myself 2 years to determine, okay, do I like it enough to stay in it, and can I support the family? And
sure.
yeah, it was great because after 6 months, I realized I absolutely love it. And it took probably a year to realize, okay, I think I can make it work long term. So that's how I
Wow.
transitioned.
There is a ton there. So thank you for sharing that. So for people listening, I mean, the two words that popped into my mind were like security and predictability,
Hmm.
which at the normally, again, there's always exceptions, but normally in a new, transitioning from corporate America to being a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, those are two words that really aren't present, right? Is the
Yeah.
security and the predictability. So were those hard for you knowing that that wasn't there, or did you not know that it wasn't there at the beginning? How did you look at that? Because I think that's the big fear that a
Hmm.
lot of people have listening right now that don't want to jump into something because, they have a mortgage, they got a dog, they got a kid, they got this, they got that, they got payments, and that all goes, that still has to get paid,
Yeah.
but that money goes away. So was that hard for you?
It was not hard for me. It wasn't hard for me from that perspective because when you get laid off, you feel a total lack of control. And
Yeah,
it made me realize, wait a minute, working for a big corporate headquarters is not as stable and secure as I thought it was.
sure,
And
sure.
I knew I could, I'd never fire myself, but other people always could. So I actually
Yeah,
felt more secure when I made the move, but I would not have thought that had I not experienced personally a corporate layoff. But once
sure.
I did, and also the unexpected divorce, you realize how little you really do control. But
Right,
when I moved into the real estate industry, I felt like I had tremendous control over my time, and and in this industry, I truly believe it's one where you are rewarded for your efforts or not. And so I felt that sometimes in the corporate world, you're not rewarded for your efforts. You have a ceiling on your income, you have a ceiling on what you can do. When you're working for yourself, that ceiling's really lifted. So there's a lot more freedom
sure.
that you get making the move I did. So I think that was the I don't think I had those concerns because of the experience I had just gone through.
Gotcha. Well, and I'm guessing the medical profession probably, if anything is stable, that sure felt like there was some stability there.
Yeah.
Um, but then it just again it goes away as quick as it came for you. So, the other thing that I really want to get your feedback on was what you mentioned, and you asked yourself a question that I think a lot of times we miss. And you asked yourself, at least you said, what would I truly want to do? And I
Hmm.
think that's really a hard question. That's that after, if somebody does get past the security and gets past that predictability, I think then there's like this vast question of I can do whatever I want. What the heck do I want to do? How
Right.
did you land on real estate? Because there's no outward connection from the medical profession to real estate.
Oh,
So how
so
did you land there?
So a couple of things. One is I grew up in a household where my parents always had real estate, and they modeled having multiple streams of income, and real estate was a way that they did that. So they had
Okay.
investment properties.
Okay.
Um, so I saw that and was a part of that. And then when I was in graduate school, oddly, I was there for a business degree, but one of the classes I was able to take was to go into, I was in Philadelphia at the time, and you could go into row homes in West Philadelphia and gut them. And then we rebuilt them with donated supplies and labor. And
Okay.
then, air quotes, sold them to cost burdened families. And so I
Sure.
got to see firsthand how a house changes the trajectory of the family. When you look at the data, it changes the the level of education obtained in the house. It changes health outcomes for the household. Unbelievable what just having a home does. And so that stayed with me while I was in pharma. So it was just it was just a natural thing that I wanted to explore when I had the opportunity.
Sure. Wow. And we it's funny because like I said before, there's no right or wrong way to transition from corporate to, owning your own business, let's say. And I remember I had a guy in the show, Betsy, that he got married, and 6 days after he got married, he came home and he said, "Honey, I quit my job and I'm starting my own company."
Oh my
And I'm like,
gosh.
dude, that was probably not the smartest. He's like, you think? He's like, that, was not a definite way to go. Um, but for you, I mean, were there other options in your mind outside of real estate, or did you immediately transition and you've been in that pretty much ever since?
No, I did have a plan B, so I kind of mentally gave myself 2 years
Okay.
to kind of make it, and then my plan B was just to go back into the healthcare system. I live in a city that has a major medical system,
Okay.
and so my plan was to go into the marketing department of that, and honestly, it would have killed my soul, um,
Yeah.
but that was my plan B. Yeah,
Wow. Well, and then there's probably a point of contention right there because some people are like, if you have a plan B, then you're not going to make it right. And I'm not here to say what's right or what's wrong. I think plan Bs are good personally because, plan A may not have worked, and then what are you going to do if something happens?
yeah,
So I think that's a wise thing for people listening is it might make sense to have a plan B in case that plan A doesn't work.
yeah.
Did you have a plan C and D, or were you like,
No,
if this doesn't
nothing.
work, I'm going back into
I had no other plans, so I'm glad it worked.
Yeah, no kidding. No, and again, I just want to reiterate, there's no right or wrong way to this. And we're talking about things like, is this it? Which is like an internal question, just like what would I truly want to do, you
Mhm.
know? And how do you answer somebody, Betsy, that says, "Hey, I want to, let's just pick something. I want to play pickleball all day long every day. That's what I want to do professionally, personally, whatever."
Mhm.
And they have a mortgage and they have family. I mean, there seems to be some wisdom here that we need to, incorporate in. Or do you
Mhm.
just think, how do you feel about that if somebody came to you and says, "I want to do this pickleball thing or golf or whatever"?
Mhm.
They want to do something that on the outside doesn't really seem sustainable, but boy,
Mhm.
it sure fills the heart inside. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts there?
I mean, I think you can. I'm a proponent of doing what you love, and I actually am a very avid pickleball player, and I have a pickleball court in my backyard that I installed a couple
Ooh,
years ago because I love pickleball. And I have a girlfriend who she wants to do just that. And there's so many ways to make money in pickleball. I mean, if
okay.
she can be a coach, she can hold clinics, she can organize camps. Um, I mean, we do pickleball
Sure,
tournaments. I host a pickleball tournament every year. So there's just so many ways you could make that work. So
sure.
I wouldn't poo-poo any idea. I absolutely
Yeah.
think there's a way to monetize anything you have as long as your mindset is how do I add value to others, you're going to be fine.
Sure, sure. That's awesome. So then you end up in this world where you're looking at real estate and you were back in Florida. So real estate's a pretty good market down in Florida, I'm assuming. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously it's, got its ups and its downs. What did that feel like when you asked yourself, was this it? And was real estate kind of your end game? Was that there, or did you feel like there was something else that was there for you?
Um, at the time, I think I felt like that was the end game
Okay.
and, built the brokerage and then added property management and added um, other verticals, title, real estate school, nonprofit. And then I asked it again,
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah, I think that's a question that will always haunt me. But yeah, I think I went through life checking these boxes thinking, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I don't know, feel this or, but um, I think I have a tendency to lose sight that it's not the end game. It's really um, the the journey and who you become in the
Sure.
journey, not so much the destination.
Sure. So does that mean that it's cool to ask that question? And it sounds like you've asked that multiple times
I
in
think
your,
so. I
okay.
absolutely, I mean, we're here for such a short period of time. If we don't ask
Yeah.
that, I would just be afraid we will have wasted it away,
Yeah.
not living life intentionally.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's so cool. I mean, I way off topic, but like, so one of our favorite bands here is Pink Floyd, and they had this question about 10, there's a comment that say 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. And I think about that a lot, how 10 years goes by. Like you said, we're here for a short time. I mean, I'm seeing not a lot of people living intentionally. They
Hmm.
just are kind of just kind of existing.
Hmm.
And I'm just curious, did you kind of in the pharma world, did you exist? And then that transition when you started to, discover some of these things on your own, or were
Hmm.
you like very cognizant of that also in the pharma when you were working in corporate?
And I feel like I absolutely have, I'm a work in progress. And so I continually learn as I get older and have more life experiences. But I do feel like I had some semblance of that even then. But I understood the trade-off because at the time I was the primary breadwinner in the home when I was married. I had two young children. The job afforded me, even though I didn't like what I did, I loved the lifestyle it provided because I never took work home at night. I never had to
Yep,
work weekends. I rarely had to travel. I worked 2 miles from my house. I came home for lunch and got to see my girls.
yep,
Um, I made a good salary. It had excellent benefits. So I understood, even though I wasn't doing the work that I felt like God, source, universe was intending for me to do, it
sure.
really did provide so many other things that improve my quality of life. And so I was willing to make that trade-off.
Were there people in along your journey, Betsy, that were like you should just be thankful for that, like where they kind of push you down and just, almost discourage you from starting your own company and going down that road? Did you have that in your world?
I, I had a lot of, and whether it was real or imagined, I felt a lot of pressure from my family to really stay very traditional and
Yeah,
um, do something much more mainstream. And in their eyes, that was be a physician, or the other two options were an attorney or an engineer for some reason. Those were the three professions that seemed to be what what was acceptable. And that they only
yeah,
wanted what was best for us, my sisters
sure.
and I, and they felt like those careers would be the best for us.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I didn't feel like they were putting me down. They just wanted the best for me, and they felt very strongly that those paths were the best for anybody.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and that's where blind spots come in. I'm working on my next book called on business blind spots. And I think about that, excuse me, because you don't know what you don't know. And you might think that, your path is great, but it might be a huge blind spot to somebody else. And it's just crazy that somebody would want to say, hey, I know what's best for you. And I guess as parents, we do that. And you
Mhm.
kind of have to do that hands-off approach type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, was there a spot where your parents kind of like accepted and were cool with what you did, or how did
Yeah.
that kind of end?
Um, so yes, so now they are, now that,
Okay.
and I try, you know, they are now because they see that I'm successful. So they're happy.
That that must have been like for them, that's a hard thing too. So again, for people listening, if you're on the outside of somebody else, I'm hoping you can find ways to encourage people,
Yeah.
be their cheerleader, silence is not necessarily a good thing.
Right. No,
You know,
absolutely.
my dad was when he was alive, my dad was an engineer and my mom was a therapist. So it was one of those scenarios where they never really understood this entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah.
right? Kind of similar scenario to you. They
Yeah.
accepted, but boy, it sure is hard along the way when you don't have a ton of people in your corner that are like really rooting for you. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping now you have people rooting for you because, and for people listening, if you don't have a lot of people in your corner, that's kind of tough,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and we'll
and
give
I
you.
do feel like entrepreneurship has definitely blossomed, in the last 25 years. I don't remember there even being a course in entrepreneurship in business school when I went in, so I definitely think there's a lot more support and resources out there for entrepreneurs now than there ever has been.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you have a great book that we want to unpack and a nonprofit. So we're going to take a quick break and when we come back. I want to unpack those pieces. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Betsy Pepine, and she is the owner of Pepine Realty and Pepine Property Management and real estate broker. Doing some coaching, doing a bunch of different stuff. Wrote an awesome book. So the book is called Breaking Boxes: Dismantling the Metaphorical. Is it? Yeah, metaphorical boxes that bind us. I'm like, man, that's like a mouthful. Can you kind of fill me in on breaking boxes because I saw the word boundaries and I'm like terrified of that word because I don't fully understand that word. So
Oh,
when you wrote that Breaking Boxes book, what's kind of the overview of that?
um, that book was a culmination of several years of me feeling discontentment in my life, 6 or 7 years ago, and trying to uncover why that was because I felt like I had checked off all the boxes to have a successful life and thus should be happy. And I didn't feel like I was feeling how I should be feeling. And when I, through a variety of different modalities, um, uncovered what was the source of my unhappiness, the common thread was this feeling of confinement, of feeling like I was living in these boxes of other people's expectations, opinions, beliefs about me, what I should do, whether they're based on my gender, my religion, my family of origin, my friends and family, the environment in which I surround myself in, all these external forces having opinions about what is the correct, right way we should be, act, or do. And I needed to get out of that. And so I started journaling all these instances of when I felt so confined and
Sure.
started writing about them and then shared the stories with other people and they're like, "Oh my gosh, help me get out of the boxes that I'm in." So that is what the book is about. It's my exploration of the boxes that I have found myself in throughout my life, how I either negotiated out of them successfully or unsuccessfully. Sometimes I wasn't even aware that I'm in a box. And so you can't get out of a box you're not even aware you're in. And we're not also just victims. We also put other people unintentionally and intentionally in boxes that can be very harmful. So it's a book on letting us be more aware of the boxes that exist, why we tend to put ourselves or others in them, and if they're no longer serving us or others, how we can exit them.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And when you were talking about checking off the boxes
Yeah.
and they weren't like fulfilling your soul, your heart. Some people would ask, and I guess when I heard that, I was wondering, is it possible that we could be like the boxes aren't right? Like we're checking off the wrong boxes,
Hmm.
like maybe somebody listening, what car they drive or their address or their zip code. Some of those are like,
Yeah.
oh, check that off, check that off. But then at the end of the day, they find out that those aren't really that important to them. And that's got
Yeah.
to be a hard that's got to be a hard realization to come to that
Yeah.
maybe some of the boxes I wanted to check off as a younger person will say all of a sudden I checked them off and they still didn't do it.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, did you
Yeah.
run into that for yourself?
Yeah, and I think we all do. And I think what I've learned is that what we desire is not really what we desire. We don't desire the object or the event or the accolade. We desire the feeling we believe we will have on the other side of that. And are there other ways to get that feeling that is more in line with your values than purchasing an expensive car, for example, or
Yeah.
whatever the object or thing you're going after is. And so, what's helped me a lot is just doing a value-based exercise on a regular basis where, I look at what my core values are personally for my life on a regular basis, 6 to 8 core values, and then filter every yes I say, everything I say yes to and every decision I make through those filters. Is it aligned with one of the core values that I purport to have? And that helps me stay in alignment and helps me be to me more authentic and fulfilled rather than
Sure.
going after these random things that you hope will fulfill some kind of need or feeling that you want.
That's got to take some tenacity, I guess is the word, because it's always the flavor of the day that seems to get people, right? So you have these core values, and I'm curious, first question is, did the core values change over time for you, or did you notice that they've been kind of consistent throughout your journey?
I feel like if you had asked me what my core values are throughout my life, they have stayed very very consistent. But
Okay.
I don't believe my behaviors were consistent with now my behaviors are much more consistent with those core values, whereas before I don't think I understood the correlation between the values and the behaviors.
Gotcha. Oh, because again, for people listening, a lot of times we don't even slow down enough to be able to identify those core values.
Hmm.
And that's, I always say, like, hey, I got to make rent and I got to pay my team. And oh, somebody just left my team. I don't have time to stop and look at core values. There's way too many things going on around me to be able to do that. I hear that excuse a lot. Was that hard for you early in your career to stop and do those values, or was that kind of instilled in you as a kid?
Uh, the exercise was not instilled in me as a kid, but I think my parents really demonstrated their core values to us and their behaviors. But no, it was the process became much more systematized in my life when I went through my divorce because at the time of my divorce, I started reading a lot about relationships and life in general and how I came to the conclusion that one, that's not a skill that we're taught, like how to build a life. And
Yeah,
when at the time of my divorce, my values were my family, my children, and my job. And
yeah,
two of those, or yeah, so two of those three were gone,
yeah,
in a very short period of time. And when you're sitting on a three-legged stool and two of the legs pop out from under you, you land on
yeah,
the floor, right?
yep,
So I was like, okay, anytime I find myself in a situation that I don't want to be in again, I always say to myself, okay, what can I do? What's in my control so that I'm not in this same situation again. So I started to honestly just explore how does one build a life?
yeah.
And that's what kept coming up is this wheel of life exercise and really getting very clear on what you stand for, what your values are, and build your life on that solid foundation. So that was in 2020 or 2001, and I've been doing that exercise ever since.
Wow, that's fantastic. Let me switch gears. How in the world, and prepping for today, how did Barbara Corcoran from the Shark Tank end up in your world? Because I was like so interested to know where that connection. I know she has a ton of real estate, going on in her world. Is that how you guys connected, or how did that work?
So the gentleman that I use an agent to buy my radio and television spots.
Okay,
And he is in New York City, and he knows Barbara Corcoran.
okay,
So about 10 years ago, he reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in, a partnership with her. And, you know, she is, I've always admired her from afar. from the
Sure.
real estate perspective as a single mother, having
Yeah.
rebuilt her company. She had to build that company twice, and then she reinvented herself when she was 60 by getting onto Shark Tank and becoming known more as an entrepreneur and not just as a business owner. So I jumped on that opportunity, and I just think she's just a fabulous person inside and out.
So were there things that you learned from her? Did she learn from you? How did you guys
I
partner?
don't know that she's learned honestly anything from me. I think that I definitely have learned stuff from her. Probably the biggest thing is her tenacity and resilience. Everything is an opportunity, and there's no such thing as no. It's maybe no, not today, no, not this week, but um, she's just incredible. She does not give up, and I love that.
Yeah. So that was a great role model for you later in your career about not giving up.
Mhm.
So again, I think it's good for people listening to it. Sometimes we as entrepreneurs, we have this ego issue where we don't think we can learn from other people and we should be the one everyone's learning from. Because let's face it, we're on the top of our company, we're on the top of our, game, so to speak. So that must have been really a great shot in the arm for you. I mean, they called you, so that's even cooler that they called you and said, "Hey, are you interested in this partnership?" Do you guys stay in contact to this day, or what do you
Yeah,
guys
so
work on?
we have an opportunity to go up every quarter and meet with her and shoot. We have commercials together, so
Okay,
we'll do commercials, or she'll fly. There's an annual conference with some of my colleagues, and sometimes she'll go to the
okay.
conference and be there for us.
Wow, that's so cool. So as we start to land the plane today, I want to ask about your nonprofit, your Pepine Gives. So
Hmm.
kind of fill us in on what that is and how that started.
It's a 501(c)(3) that's dedicated to helping the housing crisis in our area. We live in the highest cost burden county in the state of Florida. And it came to be as a result of the class that I talked about earlier at Wharton when I was getting my MBA, where we got to go and, rebuild, rehab row homes and sell them to cost burden families.
Yeah,
So we wanted to service a population that needed our services but would never be able to afford our services through the front door. And we thought, what a great way. We partner with Habitat for Humanity, and we help build houses. We fundraise, and then we sponsor, and then we help build along with Habitat houses for families in our county, and help them with home ownership. And what I love with the partnership is that Habitat's philosophy is that we're a hand up, not a handout.
yeah,
And these families, they go through a very rigorous screening process. They have to do a variety of different educational requirements where they learn about home ownership. How do you maintain a home? How do you keep it in good condition and repair? How do you manage a household budget so that um, they're kind of teed up for success. And then they also have to commit 240 working hours on their home. So it really is a true partnership with the families that end up living in the homes, and they own them. There's a misconception out there that they're given to these families.
yeah,
They are sold at market value, but Habitat's also great at finding a variety of different resources to capitalize on all the different programs that a buyer may benefit from with cost, down payment assistance and other programs, so that they have great rates, they have great terms, and so the chance of them not being foreclosed on is quite high.
yeah. That's awesome. I back in the day, I did sit on the board of our local habitat here in Wisconsin. And that was the same thing that I fell in love with too, Betsy, was the fact that, in our case, so if somebody was picked for a home, they had to give back so many hours, like you said, and they were old. We allowed them to work on other people's houses, work on theirs.
Yeah.
I think that giving back piece, that hand up, not hand out, is just so instrumental, which
Yeah.
is why that program is so successful because, there are plenty of people that want their hand is out and when do I move in? Where are the keys? Hey, I don't really like this carpet color. There's a lot of that goes on, and I think
Mhm.
that that's fantastic. So where does the Pepine Gives, where does that fit in? What are you helping? people on that journey then, educating them? Where do you fit in?
So we do a variety of different fundraising events throughout the year, and then we give money to Habitat to sponsor homes, and
Okay.
then we work on one home at a time, and we volunteer at the home. We invite our clients in the community to come out and volunteer with us, and then we are involved in the dedication of the home, and we've met the family, and then we're involved with the dedication of the home to the family, and then we move on to our next house.
Yeah, that's great. So, a couple questions I'm going to let you go on that piece before we leave that. When you ask the question, is this it? I feel like giving back in this case was really like a big component of that fulfillment
Mhm.
because I mean, I know for myself, it's like you can do X for your company, but there's just something different when you're doing something for somebody else. And I'm just
Mhm.
curious if that's how it was for you,
Mhm.
that is this it became much more fulfilling when you were doing it for other people.
I mean, absolutely. And, I wake up every day and the first question I ask myself is, how may I serve? And that's where I find the greatest joy and fulfillment is how can I serve others? Whether it's through real estate, whether it's through, I'm a big proponent of debt-free living, and we teach classes to our agents, our staff, recently released prisoners on how to live a debt-free life. Like that's where I get my greatest source of satisfaction. And when people say, "What are you most proud of?" It's those kinds of things that I'm most proud of, not how
Yeah.
many houses I've sold in a certain time period.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's really the crux of this message today is if you are at a spot where you feel you're outwardly successful, there still might be an emptiness inside. And a lot of times it's giving back that really fills that piece. And I know, and I'm sure you know too, Betsy, that there are a very small percentage of people that will take advantage of the people like you and I that say, "Hey, how can I serve?" And I think a lot of people, and I want to get your feedback on this. I feel like a lot of people don't give because they're afraid of that 1 or 2% of people that might take advantage of them. And I'm
Mhm.
just curious for that person listening, what would you tell them today?
Well, I'm a big believer in an abundance mindset, not a scarcity mindset, and I do believe that you attract what you are. So I think if you have a scarcity mindset, you are going to attract that in your life. And why would anybody want to attract that?
Right? It's like why we call our company positive polarity is like who'd want to hang out with negative people?
Yeah.
Negative people, right? They negative people like other negative people. So,
Yeah.
um, what's the puppy's name? He wants
This
to
is
be on the
this is
show today.
Charles, and he always joins me on podcasts.
Well, good. Hi, Charles. Thanks for joining us today, my friend. He looks kind of like hungry. He's licking his chops, so he
I
must
know
be.
it,
Oh,
it's
now
almost time.
he's Hi, Charles. 2 more minutes and we'll be done, my friend. Um, One last question before I let you go. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered, or maybe it's something still on your heart that you want to get out. But what would your tip of the day be today?
Um, I don't know, two mantras I have, they're not my own, but I love them is, everything is happening for me, not to me. I think that's just wonderful. And I do believe that. And then my favorite word, and we have it on our wall at the work, is next. And that's to indicate that, you know, everything is meant to be a lesson for us. We learn the lesson and then we move on from the lesson. And we don't get stuck, and dwell in the moment and in the past, but we move on,
Sure.
we've learned from it, we become better for it, and we can put it behind us. So those are my
Wow.
two
Well,
mantras.
that's awesome. Well, I know Charles, his next is treats, so I'm sure that that's what he's all being lovey on you before. So, if for somebody listening today that wants to learn more about you, Betsy, wants to connect with you, maybe something that you mentioned resonated with
Yeah.
them, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
So Dave, I have a website, which is my name, betsypepine.com. I'm on all the social platforms with my name. My handle's at Betsy Pepine. My book is on my website as well as Amazon, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, all the major online book retailers. And then we're also rolling out a course, any day, which is a supplement to the book, and that's also available on my website.
Oh, great. And it's Betsy, BetsyPepine.com. So again, for anyone listening, I would challenge you to go to that site and take a gander at it. And again, as we always say, don't just jump into your next, podcast, your next activity. Take a moment and think about what just happened here. The 40 minutes that we've invested today in opening up Betsy's life. And if you're asking yourself if this is it, then hopefully something that she shared with us today will help you. If nothing else, jump on YouTube and see this, because you'll be able to see Charles firsthand. He's definitely he's not very patient, I have to say. He's looking for something. So we will land the plane today. Thank you so much, Betsy, for sharing this. It's awesome to think that there are things beyond where we're going right now. There is a greater purpose at times. A lot of it might just be giving back. It might be serving others, but whatever that is, just want to challenge the listener and the viewer to find out what that is. So again, thank you so much for hanging out with us, and I can't wait to keep learning from you.
Oh, thank you, Dave.